thank you. Welcome, and thank you so much for spending an hour with us today, learning about a really fantastic resource that's available to support your work in educator prep. We have Dr. Karen Kehoe with us today from the Middle Tennessee State University. I'm sure I'm not going to get your title right, but you can give us your full bio, but Director of Dyslexia Supports or something along those lines. Is that close?
Along those lines, yeah. Well, I just say director.
Yeah, okay. She is the director of all things dyslexia and has some really fantastic online modules related to dyslexia that she's going to be sharing with us today. So Karen, I'm going to let you take it from here. And thank you so much for being willing to spend time with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. So it's good to see everyone, or the people that I can see. I am going to share my screen. Let me just, all right. Can you see my screen? Okay, fabulous. So thank you. Yes, my name is Karen. My last name is Kehoe. People usually don't know how to pronounce that, but that's how you say my last name. And I'm at the Tennessee Center for the Study and Treatment of Dyslexia at Middle Tennessee State University. And what I'm going to share with you is the story of how we developed this module in conjunction with our instructors of record in our College of Education Department of Elementary and Special Education program, and the purpose for developing this and what we kind of hope to do with it, and then sort of where we hope to go from this. This is right now what I'm presenting to you is just one module, but we do have plans to continue building similar modules for sort of still within the realm of dyslexia, but within sort of different topics and grade areas, or grade bands rather. I was just chatting with Stephanie right before we got started. I am happy to have you interrupt me as we go. You can raise your hand, you can put something in the chat, you can just take yourself off mute and ask me a question, or I will leave time at the end for questions. So I'm pretty flexible with that. Don't worry about, interrupting me. So I'm going to start with the context, because I know that we've got people from many different states and that we all have our own context that we're working within. And where I am is in Tennessee. And like many of you, we have relatively recent dyslexia legislation. And I say, even though it's 2016, which seems like, that's 8 years ago, not necessarily recent. We do have another law that's on the books that is more recent, 2021, but even with the 2016 law, it takes some time for people to kind of not only get used to the fact that there is a law, but then also to understand the ins and outs and then what their role is in sort of implementing that legislation. So I say 2016 is relatively recent, and this was really just called the Say Dyslexia Law, and that was really to encourage people to, you guessed it, say dyslexia, right? So that kids can be identified with a specific learning disability in reading, as we know, but that can mean dyslexia, but also that kids can have characteristics of dyslexia without necessarily being eligible for a diagnosis of SLD. And that's something that we at the center, when we work with both in-service and pre-service teachers, and this module is primarily right now for pre-service teachers, but I'll talk about how it can have a broader application. But when we speak with our pre-service and in-service teachers in Tennessee, we really try to, drive that message home, that there's a continuum, as you all know, of, reading skills, and dyslexia is sort of on a continuum as well, so that there may be students who are exhibiting or demonstrating characteristics of dyslexia, and you can say that without having to, meet all the criteria for a specific learning disability in basic reading or in reading fluency. So that's the Say Dyslexia Law, and there were some just key points to that I just want to point out. This may look familiar to what's going on in your state, or it may be slightly different, but this will help to frame why we created this module and how. So obviously screening, I think I should say obviously, I think that's the thing that when there's legislation, just from what I've been seeing, the universal screening seems to be sort of the most prevalent component of these laws that are across the country right now. And so through this universal screening process, teachers need to determine whether or not students are demonstrating characteristics of dyslexia. So you'll hear me say that phrase, characteristics of dyslexia, a lot, because that's the way we talk about it in Tennessee because of that continuum. And they are also required, teachers and schools and LEAs are required to notify parents when student data indicate that students are demonstrating characteristics of dyslexia. And then students are eligible to receive dyslexia-specific intervention through the RTI squared framework. That's not a typo. In Tennessee, we call it RTI squared. So that's response to instruction and intervention. That's why it's the I squared. So again, kind of things can be different state to state, but RTI is pretty familiar. MTSS is pretty familiar to most of you, I would imagine. And so that dyslexia-specific intervention piece has been a point of confusion throughout our state because number one, well, for a lot of reasons, but the question is like, well, what does that look like and who needs to receive that dyslexia-specific intervention? And so what this law was saying is that, again, you don't have to be eligible for a specific learning disability. You don't have to have an IEP to have those characteristics of dyslexia identified and intervened within the existing framework. It's kind of like a let's not wait to address the difficulties and deficits that we're seeing. So that's the sort of the context of the Say Dyslexia law. And then of course, teachers and schools are required then to monitor progress of students who are receiving that dyslexia-specific intervention. Okay. Then in 2021, we have what's called the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, which really expanded and sort of elaborated on the 2016 law. And this, again, talks about universal screening, talks about that parent notification. I'm going to have to move this so I can see everything. And providing dyslexia-specific intervention through RTA squared. Through RTA squared. And now that I moved you all down here, I can't advance. Okay. And the LSA also included this component of teacher training, which is kind of what helps bring us to where we are with this online module. And in that teacher training, teachers have to complete at least one state-approved course in foundational literacy skills instruction. And the state did put out some contracted rather, to create some state-approved courses in foundational literacy skills, but all teachers need to complete that. For initial licensure, and then to renew their license, then they also have to kind of show that they've gotten at least one course sort of under their belts in this foundational literacy skills instruction. And then along with that teacher training, then at the school level, schools are now required or were required as of 2021 to submit these foundational literacy skills plans, which basically outlined, I'm going to take you through the 6 steps that it outlined. And it just basically said, like, we had this law in 2016 and it wasn't, fully fleshed out. Now we've got this Literacy Success Act, which is really going to tell you all the components that we expect to see in your school for implementing this dyslexia screening and intervention. And so these are, and I copied this straight from here so you can see the quotation marks. It's page 16 of the source down here. There's a link if you are interested in kind of seeing it. Again, it's Tennessee specific, but if you are just interested in sort of how our state did it, these are the 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the 6 pieces that need to be included in these foundational literacy skills plans, or needed to be. They needed to be submitted initially and then revised. But so they actually have to specify, schools have to specify not only the amount of time that they're dedicating to foundational literacy skills instruction, but the materials that they're adopting, the screeners they're using. We have currently 8 approved state screeners, including 1 free state screener, that not everybody uses for various reasons, but then they can also use things like the Ames Web or Dibbles. So we have 8 approved screeners. So they have to specify which one they're using. And students have to be screened, 3 times, K through 3 times a year, K through 3. How the parent notification process is happening, what interventions and supports they're using to provide that dyslexia-specific intervention, and then how they're going to offer professional development to meet those teacher training requirements. So that's what needs to be in these school-specific literacy plans. And then there are also, kind of on top of that, there are revised standards in the LSA for educator preparation programs, or EPPs. And those revised standards, these are the standards as they exist now out of the LSA, out of the Literacy Success Act. I don't know why that's so difficult for me to say today. So you can see we have 8 standards, and the ones that are in bold are brand new standards. They did a side-by-side comparison of 2017 before the Literacy Success Act and 2021. And these ones that are bolded are brand new in this new iteration. The ones that are in blue existed before, but were revised to meet the requirements of the new legislation. And then so really the only one that was essentially untouched was Standard 6, professional learning and leadership. So this is the context that we were creating this module within, right? There was a lot of attention to screening for risk and characteristics of dyslexia. There was some really, really good work happening at the state level and some really good support legislatively for making some traction in dyslexia screening. And then everybody's trying to figure out how to do the work on the ground, right? So not only the schools and teachers, but then also the College of Education at MTSU and elsewhere, which we are calling our EPPs, right? So I just wanted to, I will share these slides with you, but this is just that side-by-side comparison that I talked about. So all of the blue text is how these standards were revised in response to the Literacy Success Act. So you can see that there's in this content knowledge strand, they really are beefing up what they're talking about in terms of foundational skills and really highlighting we mean phonological awareness, we mean phonemic awareness, we mean decoding, instead of just kind of like leaving that a little bit more nuanced. And so you can kind of go through all of those pieces that they're really articulating and explaining more than had previously been. Okay, so that's the context that we were working in. And so our primary goals for developing this module or one, to support our College of Education in implementing the requirements of that legislation. And the LSA there, of course, is the Literacy Success Act. And that's the last time I'm going to say that word because I'm struggling. So I'm just going to say LSA. That's our 2021 law. We really wanted to support our college. And now I should say that our center is technically within the College of Education. So sometimes I talk about them as though we're separate entities. We sort of are and we sort of aren't. We're a center that kind of falls within the College of Education, but we're not necessarily we're not the program directors of the educator preparation program. And so we wanted to support our EPP, who really is responsible for training pre-service teachers to get licensure, initial licensure. So we wanted to support them. We also wanted to help prepare the teacher. So of course we want to support our EPPs, but then we want to support our teachers in our schools because that's a big component of our mission at the center, is really to support pre-service and in-service teachers, not only in complying with the legislation, but also in, properly serving all students, including those with characteristics of dyslexia. And then the third thing was really big for us is that we wanted to integrate rather than add on. Our College of Education is doing a really great job with the most recent NCTQ report that came out. MTSU's elementary and special education program got an A+ in their foundational skills, and they're doing a great job. We were not trying to say, now you got to do this, right? It's like, is there a way that we can take the courses that they have already built, that are already getting a lot of good feedback and really preparing these pre-service teachers very well? Can we integrate some dyslexia content, dyslexia specific content into those courses that they already have? For lots of reasons that made sense, because they can't necessarily add on, even the students with their course requirements could not necessarily add on another course. So how do we take their existing framework, their required coursework, and integrate some dyslexia specific content? So those were our overarching goals. I should also say that we had the instructors of these courses, these foundational reading courses, were very ready and excited to partner with us. And that is one thing that facilitated this process. I think if we had to go and try and, let's say, sell it to them or really try to convince them of the value, I think we probably still could have done it, but I think it might have taken longer. We got this off the ground pretty quickly. I think it might have taken longer and it might have looked a little different from how it ended up looking, but they were very eager. We were very eager. And so it just was kind of a natural goal that we both had together. And so we were able to come together and put this together really quickly. So the steps to implementation, I mean, this is kind of quick and dirty, but of course we started with planning meetings. They had a desire to partner with us. We had a desire to partner with them. We knew we had some content, but then we had to figure out sort of how did these things go together. So we had to first understand what their course sequence was. And then in our context, their course sequence is actually in the process of being changed. So where they had this 1 6-hour course, they were in the process of breaking it up into 2 3-hour courses. And so in the fall of 2023, excuse me, which was when they first implemented our module, they were running the last class of that 6-hour course, and they were running the first of the 3-hour course. So we had to kind of work within what was going on with their college. They didn't want to wait until they had it fully, until they had fully made the switch, but it made it a little challenging for us to figure out where these things were going to fit in. So we had to sort of understand that and adapt. We had to understand what their goals were. We could have probably built 20 hours of content if we wanted to, but they really said, again, because we wanted to integrate and not add on, they said, here are the things that we're really looking for. We're really looking for, how do they screen? Because we know that's a requirement of the law. What do they do with those screening data? Just to really understand where sort of dyslexia identification fits within the things that we're teaching in our class. So they're teaching the simple view, they're teaching Scarborough's rope, they're teaching these things. And so how can we just kind of hit that again real quickly and then say, this is what you're learning in your course, and now here's what we're going to talk about is going to fit in. They also really wanted us to hit on helping the pre-service educators feel more confident in talking to students' families about risk and characteristics of dyslexia. And then it really needed to be feasible. And I'll talk about that when we look at the different components, but this is a flipped model. And so we really needed it to be easy to implement for people who are teaching online and teaching in person, when our module is all asynchronous online. And so we had to figure out how to make something work in sort of both of those contexts. And then when we were developing the module, of course, we kind of gave them a proposal of, here are the topic areas that we think make sense for what you're saying. And we got their blessing before we went and started creating it. But we really stuck with 4 specific foci. And so it was the science of reading. It was, that was a very broad, very quick review, science of reading, to kind of set the stage for the conversation of dyslexia. And then an overview of dyslexia, what it is, what its characteristics are, screening for risk indicators and characteristics of dyslexia, and then intervention and intensifying instruction. So we stuck to those 4 focus areas, and we stuck also to an emphasis on K2 because of the way they were splitting up that 6-hour course. They said, we used to do all of elementary in the 1 6-hour course. Now we're breaking it up. 1 3-hour course is going to be K2. 1 3-hour course is going to be 3-5. So what then we decided to do was respond to that and say, then our first module will be for K2, and then our second module will be for upper elementary grades. And then we really wanted to have it in digestible chunks. So the lectures, which we're going to look at in a minute, that are recorded, the mini lectures, are like between 5 and 12 minutes is about the average. So it's an asynchronous lecture that students can watch and rewatch as many times as they want to or need to. And we really wanted it to be you get a short lecture, you do something with that content, so that it's not, having to overload their systems, and also digestible for the instructors. And then we wanted to be flexible. Again, this module rather was implemented in both online courses and in-person courses. And so we wanted the instructors to have flexibility in how they used it. We built an instructor's guide that has a parallel structure to the way that the module is built in our LMS. The LMS that we're using is D2L Brightspace, but it can be used in other LMSs as well, which I'll get to. We wanted the instructor's guide to be interactive. So I've got a hard copy of it, but it is also in digital format. And we also have a copy of the PDF, an interactive PDF in their course in the LMS, so that they can just click on hyperlinks, so that they can go right to the activities that the students are engaged in, rather than having to, use a hard textbook. So it's like an online textbook kind of thing was our thought. And then we really wanted to take away the guesswork. We have some really phenomenal instructors of record in our College of Education, but we also know that they have also, many of them have had to make a shift over the recent decades of some things that maybe they were taught in their preparation programs, that it's like, oh, wait a second, that's not maybe, that does not align with current science. And so we have about a 13-page, I think, glossary that defines pretty much any term that you can think of, because we did not want for our instructors of record to mean one thing when they were talking to the students and us to mean another thing. So even, something like sight word, we define exactly what we mean by sight word. We define exactly what we mean by the alphabetic principle. And so we put that glossary both in the instructor's guide and on the LMS for the students to access, so that everybody is speaking the same language. And then we have learning assessments. We have a pre and a post assessment that we encourage them to give to their students before they took the module. And then at the end, we also have a quiz for each chapter, which we'll look at in just a minute. And then we have intermittent learning checks. So each section of each chapter actually has a learning check. And again, going back to that flexibility, we didn't want to dictate to the instructors that you should use this as a grade or you shouldn't. The way we designed it was not to be used as a grade. It was really to be used more as like a practice and a self-check. And so there's interactive feedback. So if a student answers, C and the correct answer was A, they can click it. When they click on C, they get a message that says, incorrect. The area of the brain that's responsible for phonological processing is actually A. But we also built in a way for the instructors to turn that feedback off so that if they did want to use it as sort of more of like a quiz, they could do that. So we really wanted to give instructors the option of how they use the different pieces that we built. And then the technical assistance, it has been a little bit limited in terms of the technical assistance that we've had to provide. Initially getting it set up required a little bit of TA, but then it was really just more making sure that depending on the format of their courses that they could implement it. But we haven't really had to provide too much technical assistance to our College of Education. Now, we've also shared this with some other universities who are using other learning management systems, and I have had to provide a little bit more technical assistance. But in terms of for our university, since we were using the same LMS, it hasn't been too much. Oops, I moved you again. All right. So the course overview, we've got 4 chapters, and these are the 4 that I mentioned earlier. The first 2 are somewhat more of the theoretical grounding, and the second 2 chapters are more of the implementation. And so really chapter 1, it does not have very much to do specifically with dyslexia, right? It's really about the science of reading to kind of say this, and we talk about the rope to kind of say this is where we're coming from the perspective of reading development, so that you can understand where students with dyslexia, with characteristics of dyslexia kind of fit. Overview of dyslexia does obviously discuss dyslexia, but it is really, again, that more historical context. It's the neurobiological basis of dyslexia, defining some terms. And then the screening, chapter 3, is really about how do we screen for risk indicators and when, and how do we screen for characteristics and when across K2. And then intervention, which I have gotten feedback from another university, and we take the feedback, and we're probably going to change the name, that it really shouldn't be called intervention. We started out by calling it dyslexia-specific intervention and then just shortened it to intervention, but really it should be intensifying instruction, because Dr. Melinda Hirschman, who actually does that chapter, does a really phenomenal job of talking about this doesn't have to be in a tier 3 setting or in a special education setting. This is how you intensify instruction for students with characteristics of dyslexia in tier 1, in tier 2, in tier 3. And so intervention is the wrong title for the chapter, but that's the way it is now. But this is sort of our pilot. So that's the overview of how it's structured. And then within each chapter, we've got sections. So you can see that chapters 1 and 2 have 4 sections. Chapter 3 has 3 sections. And I really should say that section 3.1 rather is a little bit, it's still not theory per se, but it's more that the model that we're going to use to identify risk indicators or characteristics of dyslexia. And then sections 2 and 3 are really how to do that. We do emphasize that it's screening and it's not a diagnostic assessment. It really is how you use your screening data. And in Tennessee, we talk about risk in kindergarten and characteristics in 1st and 2nd grade. So that's just sort of the way that we talk about it in this module. We try not to be Tennessee specific. So I don't think in any of the mini lectures do we say here in Tennessee, we may once or twice, but we try not to. And in the instructor's guide, there's only 1 or 2 places that refers to a Tennessee specific concept. Most of the time, it really can be applied across states. And then chapter 4, you can see chapter 4 has the most sections, but it actually has more than that, because she has 6 sections, but then she also broke section 4.3 and 4.4 into subsections. So it really has 11. She kind of got away with a lot more content. And so it was designed to be about a 3-hour module so that it could be integrated into those reading courses. If you were to do everything, if an instructor told the students that they wanted the students to do everything in the module, it's going to take more than 3 hours. But it could be if you just watch the mini lectures and maybe did the learning checks or 1 or 2 of the continue your learning resources, you could get it done in a 3-hour time frame. Okay. So this is how it looks on our LMS. Each chapter starts with just like a little graphic, and then here's what we're going to do in the chapter. The chapter will have between 3 and 5 learning objectives. Yes, Anita.
Yes, when you say 3 hours, do you mean 3 credit hours, which
Mhm.
equals to 45 hours?
Oh, no, 3 hours, 3 contact hours, because it's within a 3 credit hour course.
Oh, okay. All right. That's not very much for all of that content.
Right. And if you did all the content, it would take you more than 3 hours.
Okay.
We wanted to give a lot of choice.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And so you've got let me close that chat. And so you've got learning objectives. And again, those learning objectives are for the whole chapter. Each section will also have objectives. And then you just have a little like, here's who here's who your instructor is. In chapter 1, we actually had 2 instructors. And then these are the component, or the sections. And then you've got a quiz at the end of each chapter. So each chapter has learning objectives and a quiz. Okay, so then there's chapter 2 is what it looks like. And Dr. Odegaard does chapter 2, overview of dyslexia. Chapter 3 is screening, and that is our assistant director for clinical services, Erin Alexander. And then Dr. Melinda Hirschman has our chapter 4. And you can see again, those learning objectives. So everything is very consistent across the chapters. And then it ends with a quiz. Okay, then within each chapter, you've got those sections, right? And within each section, so now you've got each of these. And so I say section, but really in the case of chapter 4, it's also each subsection. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, I thought it was 11. So in chapter 4, you're going to have 8 sections. So you're going to, even though you have, 8 sections / subsections. So within each section, you're going to have a mini lecture, which again is between 5 and 20 minutes. In some cases, it's 20 minutes, but the average is about 5 to 12. So you'll have a mini lecture, and then following the mini lecture, you have several options for continue your learning, and I'll show you some of those options. With the continue your learning, when we talk with our instructors of record, we really made this very flexible. We said you can assign all of them, you can choose the 1 or 2 that you like to assign, however you want to do it. But they're really, we tried to make them multimodal, multimedia, so that it's not all, now go off and read this thing. So you watch the lecture, you can watch as many times as you want, you go and do however many continue your learning. We have between 2 and 5 or 6 continue your learning options for each section. And then there's a learning check. And the learning check, again, was not designed to be like a graded assessment. It was more to be a self-check. So we built in affirmative and corrective feedback. But again, our instructors can turn that off if they want. And those learning checks are interactive. So it might be a crossword puzzle with some of the terms that you had to use. It might be a drag and drop or a fill in the blank kind of thing. So it's more of an interaction. And then on chapter 4, there's an additional component for some of the sections. So these sections that are really practical. So cracking the code and orthographic mapping, those first 2 sections are kind of like, why does all this stuff matter? Why are we going to do all this stuff? And then in PA and letter knowledge and in basic decoding, those are the 2 sections that she really gets into practical application. And so we added this component, which is called connecting knowledge to practice. And what we wanted to do was show real teachers with real students, and in very short clips. So it's like, you've learned all this stuff, we've given you some activities, you've taken a learning check. We also want you to see somebody actually implementing this. And then we have some guiding questions. So, and again, the instructor might want to use the guiding questions to use in a discussion board, or to use, write a 1-page reflection. We don't give any sort of, we don't put any parameters or give it any sort of instructions on how to use those guiding questions. We just say, think about these questions while you watch this video. And these videos, most of them, we just link to the IES series where it's implementing, those practice guides, because they're really good, they're really short, and they show authentic teachers with authentic students implementing some of these practices. Okay, so this is an example of a mini lecture. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. This one's like 18 minutes, but they all follow. We worked with our college college. We worked with our Center for Educational Media to get these videos sort of more professionally produced. We also did closed captioning. We're not relying on like YouTube or Vimeo to auto-generate our closed captions. Our Center for Educational Media actually contracted and got live people to sit there, and then we corrected. So if we're pronouncing a phoneme, sometimes the auto-generated captions are not going to, you know, accurately reflect what we want them to say. So then we went in and line by line looked at the files of the closed captions and fixed them. I don't have them turned on here because of some technical issues. I'm using a different computer, but when they're in the actual LMS, the closed captions are there and they're accurate closed captions. So I'm just going to play I'm just going to play this when I have to get down here, just so you can see what it looks like. Well, I have to stop. Okay, I've just got my share. Okay.
For this first set of videos, I'll be talking about dyslexia and how it's defined. You know, what is it? What is dyslexia? What are you going to learn? Well, you're going to gain an understanding of dyslexia and its definition. You're going to know what those primary characteristics are that you should be looking for in classrooms, as well as the secondary consequences of dyslexia. And you're going to gain an understanding of what often comes along with dyslexia, those comorbid conditions like ADHD and dyscalculia, and how often that happens for these kiddos with dyslexia. For section 1, we're going to talk about the evolution of dyslexia as it's been studied and researched for approximately 150 years. And I'm going to highlight in this first section a shift that happened from thinking of dyslexia as this vision-based problem to one that we now ground in language and language development. When I talk about the evolution of dyslexia as a construct, it's important to know that it has its basis in studies that looked at individuals, adults who acquired a problem with reading after.
I just wanted to show that part because, let me go back to my screen share here. Because what we have the same format. So we're all kind of in front of each of the mini lectures is in front of that sort of bookcase. We have the same PowerPoint template. And then we have kind of back and forth with the, you know, full screen lecturer speaking and the PowerPoint or picture in picture. So they all kind of look like that. They're all produced in the same way. And again, we have the accurate closed captions, which you did not get to see there. Okay, so then the continue your learning resources, we have things like videos, podcast recommendations. We have, in certain cases, news media or journal articles. We do have to be careful with the journal articles, but because this was is a course for our students, we could put empirical articles that we were able to get through our databases. We could put them right into the LMS because it was for educational purposes. We just have to be careful about, you know, licensing and things. But so there was one case where we actually went in and instead of having the published article, we used like a working paper that was published online for free, for open access. So we were able to kind of get around that. And then anything that we linked to, we vetted everything, of course, like our whole team went through and said, oh, I think this would be a good resource for this or that. But everything that we link to that we say, oh, if you want to continue learning about, you know, dialects and multilingual learners with this concept, go here. And if we link out, we made sure that it was not behind a paywall. So it was something that was open access, so like an IDA fact sheet or the talking to them about how they can download the Science of Reading, Define and Guide, that kind of thing. So those are the continue your learning resources that really there's no follow-up unless the instructor wants to build that. So, hey, I want you to go and read the Washington and Steinberg article, now write a reflection on it. The instructor can do that, but that's not built in. We just have options for them to continue their learning. And then the check your learning, this is an example of something that is from chapter 4, and it is a drag and drop. So she gives a little description of the sound symbols that the kids have learned to date. And so that, and this is in the context of this is Dr. Hirschman, is talking about how decoding is decodable is relative. So we call something a decodable text, but that doesn't mean it's decodable for everybody. It's decodable for the children who have learned the spelling patterns in that text, right? So she kind of gives this background of, based on these spelling patterns that the kids have learned, which one of these words down here are regular for decoding and have been taught, which ones are regular for decoding but aren't yet decodable for these children, and which ones are mostly decodable but also contain an exception. And so she just has them sort of drag and drop. And again, there's that corrective and affirmative feedback built in there. Okay. And then this is what the instructor's guide looks like. And this is what it's not that thick. It's pretty, but everything that's in, so I had said that there's a parallel structure. So the,
Hey, this one's
sorry. So everything, I think I went by it too quickly. Everything that's in the LMS. No, I'm too fast. Oh, I don't know why I went so fast over it. Sorry, right there. Those pieces, so section 1 is always blue, section 2 is always green, section 3 is always orange kind of thing, regardless of the chapter, so that it's just kind of very consistent and easy to find things. And then the instructors can match up very quickly what the students are doing with what's there in their instructor's guide. And then, okay, so then the next things that we're really looking toward, so I should say right now, the way that it's being implemented is, and I had mentioned the one class that's being sort of broken into 2 classes. So in the fall of 2023, it was implemented in the 1 6-hour class for K, it was kind of covering K5, but then it was also implemented in the new class being focused on K2. Those were both in-person courses. So how the instructors integrated that, we have a meeting coming up to kind of learn, because we gave them flexibility. So now we're going to have sort of a feedback session about how did you implement it and what worked, what didn't, so that we can continue to revise it. But we also had an early childhood educator instructor who wanted to use it in her ECE class, which we were a little surprised by. And so we don't think that she used all of it. She may have, maybe she only used the screening for risk in kindergarten. We're not really sure, but we said, yeah, sure, you can have access to the content. And then will you just agree to meet with us and tell us, how it went and how you used it. Then we also had 2 instructors who are teaching a hybrid online course who also implemented the module. So that's sort of our next step internally, is to evaluate these different ways of implementing, see what improvements we can make to the module. Then we also, I keep doing that. And then we also, and then we're going to take that and revise the K2 module that we've currently built. And then we're going to expand offerings. So our next plan was going to be 3-5, but we've pivoted a little tiny bit just because of some feedback and some needs, that we're actually going to do a 6-hour instead of one more 3-hour class on dyslexia in 3-5. We're actually next going to work on structured literacy and dyslexia and screening for risk and characteristics of dyslexia across K5. But that's going to be a longer course, and that's going to be, again, that totally asynchronous. And so we're going to see not only if our instructors at MTSU want to use it, but then also working with external partners. So we're currently working with 5 universities and 2 state departments of education, who my boss, Tim Odegaard, if you know him, he has kind of been out there talking to people about it. And I've been out there talking, and he's talked about this module, and they're like, oh, let me take a look at it. And so then we've shown them some pieces, and they're like, I actually want to use this with the special educators. We are requiring them to take, 3 hours of content on dyslexia. Can we use this? And so we've been working with those other universities and departments of ed to be able to use this content. So not only this module, but upcoming modules that we continue to develop, we're going to be working with our external partners. And and then we are also in the process of doing our IRB work to be able to, at least internally with our pre-service educators, to be able to connect how they're performing on the pre-post assessment of the dyslexia module with their other demographics and background. So for instance, how they're doing in their education courses generally versus how they did on the pre and post assessment, how much they learned. We're just kind of interested in kind of taking a look at some of that. And then also whether or not these different implementation models have a difference in how effective they were. So for instance, if somebody did every single activity, had their students do every single activity in the continue your learning and did all this and spent a lot more time engaged with the content versus less time, did that, lead to more learning and that kind of thing. So that's on the research side, how we kind of want to look at implementation of the module. And then that's pretty much all I have in terms of the overview. But I also put something in the chat. It's like a 2-page document that kind of gives a little bit of background if you're interested in reading that. And I am happy to take questions.
So Karen, I'm just wondering, do you know if anyone has taken the content of this module and used it as kind of a jumping off place to really expand and revise a course? Because it seems like you've got a lot of nice pieces there and a structure, and people could really elaborate and expand on it. So do you just know anecdotally of anyone who's used it in that way?
Not yet, because we just used it for the first time in the fall.
Okay.
The external partner, external to MTSU, who we worked with, where we've kind of spent a lot of the fall getting contracts and talking and showing things. So they haven't implemented yet. But I do expect that some people are going to use it that way, but we're not far enough along in the process for them to have done that yet.
Karen's asking in the chat, can we access the list of dyslexia screeners Tennessee is using?
Sure. Yes, you may. And actually, let me just go. Actually, I don't need to share this. Hang on one second. It is on. It's in one of the links to the okay. It's not that one. There it is. Yeah. All right. So in this document, so this is linked on slide. I should have just looked at what slide it was on. Linked on the slide that talks about the Tennessee Literacy Success Act. It's linked there. And it is on page 5 through 7. And it's right. Oh, no, I think it's the next page. These right here. Can you see those where it starts with Ames Web?
Yes.
Those are the approved.
Karen Ingalls, does that help, or do you need the link? Should we ask Karen Kehoe?
It does. I think if we get the slides and it's linked in the slide, then I can pull it out, but thanks.
Yeah. I'll put it in the chat too, just in case.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It looks like Laura is asking, is the content of the module available for others to use, or is this just a pilot specific to MTSU?
It is available for others to use. We, as I said, we're working with 4 other universities, and they are paying a very not nominal, but a very low fee to be able to use this for because was not really it's our first pass of this. It's like a pilot. So for like $2,500 is what we're writing into these contracts. They can have access to pretty much everything. We're not trying to make money off of this. We're just trying to cover our costs. And then really the big stipulations are that, it's perfectly flexible. We don't say you have to use it in this way or that way. You have to use all components, but we just do say that anything that is used, we just need the MTSU sort of branding to stay on there. And we retain ownership of the, oh, I'm sorry, Stephanie, I just put that just to you. I meant to put that to everyone.
Oh, I will share it.
There we go. I just did. So yes, we are sharing it with others for a fee of $2,500.
Excellent.
Sure.
Let's see what other,
2,500 for how long?
For
Is
3
it
years.
yearly? Oh, 3 years?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
the interactive learning checks that are part of the module, are
Mhm.
they specific to your LMS or is there a different application?
Oh, so there is a different application. So it is H5P, which talks to D2L and Canvas and Moodle, and possibly some others. So I've worked with one, it's actually at the Office of Public Instruction at a state, and they're using Moodle. And so as I think I mentioned earlier, that I've had a lot more technical assistance that I've provided to people not using D2L, as you can imagine. But they've actually, once we kind of went through the different components and I was able to export the course in a certain way, then they were able to say like, oh, I understand how this maps onto what we use. And so then they kind of build it, and we've only met twice, I think, and they're almost done kind of importing our stuff. And then one other used D2L, so that was fun. But with Moodle, you can also create the H5Ps, and then Canvas also has H5P. So, but I also did, so our graduate students at MTSU could not get into the course because they weren't enrolled in it. And so anyway, we had to, but we wanted them to take this course sort of for a lot of different reasons. So I actually recreated all of those interactive activities, those interactive learning checks in like a PowerPoint slide. So you can drag and drop on the PowerPoint. It's just the only benefit or the only drawback there is you don't have the immediate feedback, but we could create there's a workaround. But I think it's preferable to do it in H5P or to recreate it in your LMS if you don't have H5P.
Will you be able to share your slides with us that you
absolutely.
shared today? Okay, great. Did I miss anybody's question? Anybody want to unmute with a comment or question?
There's somebody.
I have a quick question. Hi, I'm Lauren. I really loved what you said about having like a bank of terms and consistent definitions for use across the program. Is that something that you collaboratively created amongst all of the instructors, or was it something more like we created this and then it was shared with an expectation that folks use it?
It was not created with the instructors of record. It was the 4 or 5 of us who are the the lecturers of the mini lectures, but it also built off of some work that was done before I got to the center that was done with MTSU and the state of Ohio. They had kind of built a glossary around something they had done for them. So we took many of those same terms, but then we added to it. So it was really the 5 of us, and then we commented on each other. So it wasn't just like, what do I say is a sight word? And then, that becomes in print. It's like, what do I say is a sight word? And then how does Melinda and how does Aaron and how does Tim, how do they all kind of, and so we kind of chimed in on each other's definitions.
Great. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Stephanie is asking how long it took all of you to create this module, because it sounds like it was quite a collaborative effort. I'm sure you learned a lot even just in the process of creating it.
Yes, we did. So we started on it, I want to say a week after I started. I started last February. So probably around this time last year is when we started. And then we had it live by August. So it was August 1st really was our target date for having everything complete. But I think it wasn't actually in. So March, April, May, June, July, August. So a little over 6 months. Any other questions?
Other questions? Feel free to unmute.
Katie Cunningham raised her hand.
Hi. Thanks so much. This was really fabulous to see all the hard work y'all have put into this and how generous you're being in sharing it with this community. I was just curious about in the overview of dyslexia, if kind of the multidimensional nature of dyslexia is not only, academic related to reading and writing, but the ways in which it impacts math or other content areas, or the social emotional components of dyslexia in general, but also kind of the consequences of reading failure for kids. I'm wondering if that's kind of embedded into your overview, or, maybe it's further work y'all are doing as you revise.
It is embedded, not so much the math, not so much the impact on math. And I mean, I think Dr. Erdegaard touches on the fact that it can impact performance in other academic areas, but he doesn't spend a lot of time on how it might look, how it might sort of manifest in like a math class. He definitely talks about the social emotional consequences as sort of like those secondary consequences. And that's also, as you kind of, so it's like a yes and to your question. It's also something that we've talked about, that we want to build a home. We want to build so many modules because we had a lot of fun doing this, and it was really, we all kind of think that there's a need for us, and not just us, not just the 5 of us. We want to be getting other people into, can you do this component for us? But the social emotional consequences and the mental health aspect is something that Tim and I in particular have talked a lot about. So we're not there yet, but yes, we do want to touch on that. But he also talks about, he has one of his interactive learning activities is sort of that cascade of like the primary characteristics and how they lead to, I'm trying to see if I can put my hands on it like right away, but how they can lead to, like you said, reading failure and reduced world knowledge and vocabulary knowledge because of, more limited reading. And it's right here. You can't see it real well, but that's kind of how that cascades down to impact primarily reading, but social emotional is in here too. I think that's really small.
There's a question in the chat about the $2,500 price for accessing the module. Is that just for the K2 module or the 3.5?
It's just for the K2. That's the only one we have built right now.
Pam, you're unmuted. I don't know if you have a question or if that's accidental. I wonder if you've had any in-service educators, current educators in districts maybe that your program partners with, to take the modules. I just wonder what the reaction is of, currently working educators, because I hear from so many that they aren't aware of the characteristics of dyslexia. They're not sure what their role is in helping to design services for students with dyslexia, or serving on multidisciplinary teams and so forth. There's just so much misunderstanding. So I wonder if you've heard any response or reaction from folks in the field about the content.
We haven't yet, because we really did build it with our undergraduate pre-service educators in mind. We do think that it has broader application, but as we've talked about, building the next one, we're going to be much more intentional about, even just the language that we use when we say, instead of saying students, because we were talking to students, now we're, to say educators. And then when we talk about students, to actually be talking about the K-12 students. And so just things like that, because we have mostly been targeting for this module pre-service educators. And then with the next one, thinking, how can we make this a little bit more universal for in-service educators who maybe don't have this foundational knowledge as well. But that's also something that especially Melinda, Dr. Hirschman, and Aaron Alexander go out, and that's part of our core services that we do, is we go out and provide in-service to educators throughout Tennessee about just that. And we do have very good, we get very good feedback on those workshops that they do.
Yeah, I would think even the folks who are supervising your students in field work, this would be very beneficial for them, those partners as well. There's a question in the chat about any plans to do a secondary version, for secondary teacher prep.
Yeah, it's sort of like, what do you call a plan? Yes, we have a dream and a vision. But Yeah, we've been working on getting this LMS. So we have right now D2L, which the university uses, but we as a center are getting our own sort of platform so that we can put these on our own LMS. So that is definitely one that's in the queue, and it's kind of like what's going to come next. We already know what our next one is. That's that 6-hour structured literacy that I talked about. And then whether or not we go to sort of the adolescent literacy at that point, or another one that we've been talking a lot about is supporting multilingual learners and emergent bilingual. So yes, I can't say it's going to happen this year, but we definitely want to. Dr. Hirschman did a really great summer workshop last year on exactly that, on identifying characteristics of dyslexia in grades 4 through 12. It was really great. But so now we just need to get her to take that and it's a lot of work, right? But to take that content and put it in this kind of format. So we'll do it at some point. I don't know when.
That's fair. Any final questions? Yes, Katie.
So I'm just curious, the impact of this on Tennessee and with the legislation, of say dyslexia law. So in Tennessee, do school districts say dyslexia more? And like as a result, potentially of this training or the ways in which this complements kind of the, sort of grassroots movement in Tennessee. Do schools say dyslexia in Tennessee more easily than 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, so that's hard for me to speak to 5 or 10 years ago because I just moved to Tennessee within the last 6 months. But I do know that yes, they are saying it more, but there's still go to the Tennessee Center for Dyslexia. They'll test you, or go to your pediatrician to get a diagnosis. And it's not, I'm an educator. I know how to do this. I know that it's my legal requirement to screen you for characteristics of dyslexia. And I feel confident that I can do that. And then that I will know what to do with those data. That we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about kind of another component of the modules related to all the equity issues, that the laws are attempting to address. But I live in Connecticut, who I think is speaking to you all on a state level about your modules. And the need for an external evaluation in order to be able to get the diagnosis, and the enormous cost financially and emotionally on a family. Yes. And that I think that so many, certainly pre-service teachers, but also in-service teachers, are pretty unaware of the toll it takes on a family, just speaking from personal experience. That it's one thing to legislate, and it's another thing for practices and beliefs to change. So yeah, I applaud you all for what you've created here in an attempt to move the needle.
There is also something that you brought up is it's hard for me to type and talk at the same time, but I'm going to try. There is a concerted effort that we're making we say that we don't diagnose, which sometimes turns some parents off. And we say, do you understand that if your child is coming here, we're not going to give a diagnosis of dyslexia? And that is because, number one, we don't have a licensed clinical psychologist on staff. We have an expert school psychologist who is more than equipped to do that. But we really try to drive that point home, that it is identification. And we identify which characteristics of dyslexia we are seeing or not seeing. And so that kind of also helps I think, to empower teachers that it doesn't have to be a diagnosis. So we talk a lot about characteristics of dyslexia as opposed to you have dyslexia, because it's not a, black or white, as it's not a you have it or you don't. It's where are you on that continuum? And the thing that I was trying to type was, this again is going to be something that is not going to be universal because it is for Tennessee, but it is a good resource that you could potentially adapt. So if you go to the part of our website that I just put in there, it's ebooks, and we have a resource guide. It's called, it's all the way down at the bottom. It's called Understanding Dyslexia, a Guide for Tennessee Families. And that sort of explains the special education process. It explains the legislative process and all of that. And it really kind of breaks it down. It's still pretty overwhelming for parents. But when we assess kids in our center, we do go through that booklet and we say, here's where you can find this information and that information. And that's up on our website for free. So if you wanted to take a look at that and, try to adapt it and create something for your state that aligns, parents have told us that it's helpful. It can be overwhelming, especially parents who have maybe reading difficulties themselves, but it's our attempt.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Somebody has a hand raised. Stephanie?
I was just wondering, is Tennessee like a local control state? I mean, I'm in Massachusetts and we're local control, so we can give guidance on a lot of things, but we can't require anything really, except for the screening. That's been through the legislature, but like, the districts can decide what materials they want to use. They don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, no, they definitely have to. We don't have a curriculum other than like high quality instructional materials and things that have to be, they have to be sort of aligned, but there's not everybody has to use this curriculum, but there is there's more than just guidance. They do have to, districts do have to comply with the law in terms of using a state approved screener, submitting those plans, implementing curriculum that is aligned with the state standards. My sister's in Massachusetts, and when she listened to Soda Story, she called me. She's like, "What are my kids getting?" And I was like, "I don't know. Go find out, though."
It is it is challenging because the very wealthy districts, they're kind of doing what they're doing because 80% of their kids are doing okay, and they look good on state testing, and the parents can pay for tutors.
Exactly. The parents paying for tutors. Yeah. I'm in Massachusetts as well. Well, I live in New Hampshire, but teach in Massachusetts. And there's been a lot of information in the Globe. A lot of parents are asking questions. So those are great resources. I was had to go to the orthopedic doctor, and he asked me what I did. And I said, I teach at college and north of here. And he's like, what do you teach? And I said, reading, teach teachers how to teach reading. And he's like, what kind of reading? And I said, I just laughed and I said, reading based on the science of how the brain learns to read. He goes, so not that Lucy stuff, right? And I was like, right. But it was really interesting because he's been reading the Globe. He has, based on what I could see in his office, he has a first grader. So he's really interested and has high stakes right now. So I think, Massachusetts is just giving guidance, good guidance, but not, and money to certain curricula, not others, but not mandating anything.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all, first of all, for being here, for your time today, for your really good questions and conversation. And yes, help me to thank Karen, especially for being here and sharing all of her great work with us. We really appreciate it. I want to make sure everybody knows about our next webinar coming up on March 12th with Kelly Butler. She's going to share with us about the Reading Universe platform. That is a free repository for all kinds of materials about the science of reading. The folks behind Reading Rockets are also behind the Reading Universe. So March 12th at 7 Eastern is our next webinar. So we hope to see you there.